Next up, we have a panel discussion, and I gave it the quite controversial title, Which Social Media Metrics Matter? Because I know there are a lot of people here who are up that close to their social media monitoring and measurement and need some figures and some advice on that. So we've got Philip Sheldrake, who is the managing partner of Euler Partners, who is going to be chairing this. And we've also got, Jackie Taylor is back up, and Katie de la Haye-Payne can rejoin us. And we also have Matt Owen, who's head of social media at eConsultancy, and Andrew Bruce Smith, who's the director at Escherman, who was involved in our workshop yesterday. So over to you, Philip, to carry on.
Hands up if you've seen a presentation on an award-winning social media campaign. Wow, you're just like me. Yeah. And how are you feeling after 10 years of that? Yeah. Because I think Katie de la Haye-Payne puts it beautifully when you see those presentations on an outstanding Facebook campaign, an incredible Twitter engagement, maybe an internal enterprise network. And you ask, so what? At no point have you opened a PLC annual report recently and read the chairman's remarks at the front, where he or she has then proceeded to say how stoked they are to quadruple retweets in the last financial year. There's a disconnect between what we're doing at the coalface and what's resonating in the board. And hopefully this panel will help to make a little bit of a connection between those two. I have an august panel. I won't go through their bios because you've got them right in front of you. We just get on with the content, I think. And I'm going to open up by asking each of you to lay your stall out in 140 seconds. Andrew.
Okay. I guess the dull answer is to answer the question, what metrics matter most, I would argue are clearly that the metrics that have the most direct and biggest impact on your business and organizational goals. And I can see everyone start to fall asleep at that point because that's what we've been saying since the year zero. But I think it's more important than ever that we do address that question and that answer in that way. I'm sure we'll get around to the whole conversation about ROI. And just to lay out my stall there, I'm a big fan of a guy called Olivier Blanchard. I don't know if you've ever come across him, but he's got a great book called Social Media ROI. If you haven't read it, I'd strongly recommend it. He's got no truck with things like return on engagement, return on participation, return on this, return on that, return on ignorance. Yeah. As far as he's concerned, ROI is return on investment. The currency is cash, it's money, nothing else. I think part of the challenge is that with social media metrics, we're wallowing in non-financial metrics that are ultimately disconnected from genuine financial metrics, ROI metrics, and it's no bloody wonder that we have such a tough time quite often proving the business case or the organizational case to invest in our social media programs.
Thank you very much.
How's that?
Short, sharp, and sweet. You're perfectly done. Thank you. Katie.
That was more than 140 characters, though.
I over-delivered.
I think the biggest, most important metric is the one that it's not just related to the business or the cash. It's the one that translates the overall corporate goals from down to your corporate communications goals, and from those corporate communications goals into what you do every day. And in general, I find it's messaging, engagement, and financial stability in some way, shape, or form. There's always three. There's never just one. I'd love to say there's just one, but there's always going to be three. One is going to be something along the lines of cost effectiveness. One is going to be in the lines of I am making a more solid relationship with my customers and my prospects. And one is I'm getting my messages out there. So that's three.
Jackie.
Okay. For me, as a numbers person, it's about context. I mean, I saw the figures that Obama's White House team put out about the the state of the economy in the US, and they were all massive numbers, but what do they mean? And so if you're going to use anything from a social media point of view, it's got to be in context with another number in the organisation. And so that's why I focused on the social media innovation we were doing, is blending in teams where you've got social media specialists with people that are used to numbers. So I think you have to develop a set of metrics, and that's not benchmarks and KPIs and what have you. It evolves on from that. But everybody is trying to achieve a set of objectives, but you can't achieve it without those social measures. But it's certainly not likes, and I completely disagree on the return on investment. I would never put that in a board discussion. I would talk about it as influence and then try to create the language around the language the board understands, but bringing in our social value. Because as I said, I think the social data is actually the key, but we'll never convince anybody of that, not now. And then in 5 years' time, we'll all be heroes because everybody will understand. But in the meantime, we have to dialogue and language on the way that they language now. So I think it's developing those metrics, but always making sure they're in context.
Well, thank you. We have a bit of dissonance on the panel, which always makes it a little bit more interesting.
That, don't you?
Last thing you want to look at is 5 people in violent agreement. So, Matt.
Yeah, well, I'm going to put my guru hat on to start with and say that, very fetching, I don't think there are no social media metrics. There's only points in your customer journey. But in terms of ones that matter to the board, it's money usually. The trouble is that we are still, those of us that are working on this, we're kind of still looking at last click attribution and this kind of thing. And I know that, from my own experience, if I go in and I say, okay, we made £1,000 from Twitter, and then I look at my attribution value and I think, okay, we made £20,000 from Twitter. And then I sort of think, but we also made 20,000 in attribution from email. And you expect emails to convert, and you don't think that they're going to be an attribution value really to email. You think somebody gets an email and they buy something or do something, or they don't, But it makes you sort of think that all of these points are connected. Social data is no different to any other marketing kind of messaging, really. It's and the difficulty for people working on it, obviously, is they want to be able to go to their boss and say, we made X amount of money, can we have another social exec to help us out because of that? But the boss is only really looking at that last click and saying, oh, there's no real value. I'm not getting that return of investment. In fact, it's kind of about the business almost reorganizing itself to realize that all of your marketing affects all of the other marketing, and all of your customer touch points affect all of the others. So I'm not going to use the word holistic in public, but
you just did.
Yeah, but I just did, exactly. And I think likes and follows and things they're vanity metrics really. You can buy as many as you want, and I agree with Jackie that it's all really about targeting as well. They've got to be the right people at the right time.
Well, thanks very much for a quick roundup of what the panel thinks, but everyone in this room's into dialogue, not monologue. It's all about engagement. So I wonder if I might engage you early. Would anyone like to grab the mic and tell us how you've cracked it? Okay, would anyone like to grab the mic and tell us how you're struggling? One last chance for engagement before we write you off and write down this particular metric. Oh, we have one here. That worked. Look at that. As soon as you said that, incentives. There we go.
No, I just felt sorry, so I thought I'd jump in. Thank you. Just a really quick one. So,
could you say who you are?
Sorry, my name's Sharon. I'm from Confused.com. I run the content and PR on social media there. Just in terms of vanity fans and likes, we're talking. Would you say that using, say, promoted accounts and promoted tweets, would that in your minds be kind of vanity, building up likes and fans in that way, or because people have actually opted in then, haven't they, to follow you? So I just wondered what your thoughts were on that.
We used promoted tweets last year for about 6 months, and obviously, like e-consultancy is a digital marketing resource. You know, it's a fairly niche market. And a lot of the time, I think when you see promoted tweets, a lot of them are just really badly targeted. You can target that stuff really well if you've got the time and the inclination to do it and you think about it. We were kind of targeting at small farmer marketing events in the American South with 200 people going to them. And and you can target down to at name if you want with a promoted tweet. And for us, it was quite good. I think we put in about £15,000 of dollars, and we made about 75 back from tracking the links and tracking conversions through that.
So, Matt, you used the word vanity. Can you explain when you invoke that word?
Yeah, I think it's when you get a message from someone higher up in your organisation saying we need 1 million likes because our competitor's got 1 million likes. It's like, who cares? That's fine if you're selling exactly the same product. Then those are probably useful customers for you.
So we were swapping war stories before this panel, and one of you had an egregious case study of someone who had to buy. Was that you, KT?
Yeah, it was me.
Andrew.
So my favourite example recently was a very large multinational brand where I think the agency had in Hong Kong had created a Facebook page and got 60,000 fans in a couple of months. So the company was overjoyed and came back and told the UK marketing director, we want the same here, if not better. Go forth, create a Facebook page and get us 70,000 fans. And when the agency concern was advising the client that there was a strong suspicion that these fans had effectively been bought. I forget what the going rate was, probably 2,000 fans for 50 quid. And that if they were going to take that approach, then it should be done kind of organically, and it will take time, and all the kind of usual mum and apple pie stuff that we talk about in social media. And the reaction back was, just find me the cheapest place to buy Facebook fans. Because senior management had demanded a big number, so that person was going to give them the number they wanted. And all they wanted was the quickest and most effective way, as far as they're concerned, to do it. And cynical or what, but they thought, well, by the time somebody finds out, I'll have moved on, got a new job, who cares? Now, that's an extreme example, but I strongly suspect that obsession with big numbers and, Twitter followers, our rival X has got this number, we have to have similar, which ignores all the stuff about, fake followers, et cetera, and it just avoids the disconnect between what is the ultimate goal you're trying to achieve. I think as Olivier Blanchard would point out, there's nothing intrinsically wrong with focusing on, say, a Twitter follower count, but you have to then demonstrate its relationship to the end goal and the business and organizational objectives that you have. That's traditionally been a challenge. It's not as big a challenge as it used to be, and I know Matt's, I believe, using Google Analytics and attribution analysis very, very well, and I strongly advocate that as well. I think there are some extreme examples out there, and I do believe there's a sadly prevalent attitude from the hippos out there. Are we familiar with the concept of a hippo? Highest paid person's opinion, who are kind of obsessed with those big numbers.
That's a perfect segue, because I've identified 3 keywords that we can explore in the next half hour that came out in your startup summaries. The first is I've labelled cascade, the second one is attribution, and then we will get to ROI. But by cascade, that's the word I use to make sure there's a connection between what the board, the management team has said is important for the business, and what we're doing at the coalface. And I know that came out strongly in your summary, Katie, so I wondered if you could expand on that.
Yeah, basically, when somebody says, we need to count likes or followers or whatever, I'm like, so what? I mean, it goes back to, I want the front page of the New York Times or the London Times or whatever. So what? So what if all 1.9 million readers of the New York Times call you up tomorrow, right? Do you have the capacity to handle that? Is that something you want? So what? Let's talk about the business impact of this. So you get 70,000 likes or followers. So what? What does it matter to the business? If they cannot come up with an answer that directly ties back up to the corporate mission, the goals, or at least, at the very least, the objectives of the communications department, then you shouldn't be doing it. And you should be able to say, wait a minute, this makes no sense. You told me at the beginning of this year that our goals were to increase in, blah, 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 blah. Here are the 3-4 things that our communications department is supposed to accomplish. Make the connection, right? So if the answer to the so what does not tie back into that cascading chain of objectives there, then don't do it.
So this is a field with an acronym called BPM. Has anybody come across that? That's Business Performance Management. Business Performance Management is conducted across the entire organisation of the Global 2000 up until you get to someone with a job title of marketing or PR.
Well, actually, that's not true. I talk to them all the time.
That's a stereotype because traditionally we've done logistics, we've done R&D, we've done production, we've done supply chain based around business performance management. And there's been a reluctance or an inability to join the dots as far as the marketing/customer service/public relations part of the business. To a certain extent, I feel that that's partly because public relations towards the end of the 90s had been shrunk down to something as simple as media relations, in column inches, as opposed to, as the definition from the CIPR would have it, building relationships to establish goodwill, which is part and parcel of being PR alongside marketing, which is, I'm going to create something of value so that you'll give me some value in return. Some cash. That's the sales side of it, things. So what I'm interested in about social media is it, of course, spans marketing, sales. It spans public relations, reputation, trust. It spans customer service. In fact, isn't customer service just public relations? So we're actually changing the way in which an organisation needs to be structured in order to play our role in business performance management. Jackie, have you seen this come through? I guessed as much from what you were saying at the front.
Yeah, I have. And essentially, if all you do is take that translation of what we did with the supply chain and land it in there, you'll fail. And that's where I was saying we needed blended teams, we needed to get these projects financed from the board, albeit they don't necessarily need to understand what it's going to deliver now, but they need to see it as a discovery process, an innovation of something to learn, because this is very iterative. What it is for your company is not what it is for... So when I do this in a bank, what I did in the last bank means absolutely nothing. But one thing I know for sure is that the distinction between internal and external comms has actually just been removed. There's all the piece about everybody that is involved in social is everybody in your company. It's not to do with a social media specialist. And if you think anything else, just look at the leaks that are happening from your company. Just look at, if you don't understand what everybody's personal Twitter accounts are, Facebook accounts, what is being said about you and what your employees are responding to out there on Twitter as themselves, that has to be measured and that has to be taken into account as well. So the idea that there's some sort of, this is a departmental silo, no, this is actually a layer that goes across the organisation, and the banks and government are understanding that the power of what they have in our new web world is people. And that humanity and that connection between those points across the globe, it's not to do with who I'm personally connected with, it's that whole network, that 6 degrees of separation. Companies that are understanding that are making a complete reorganisation. And we literally measure across an entire internal, external comms, and we find what we call hot spots and cold spots. Hot spots, best practice, socialise that, educate. We start with the CXOs because that's the best place to start. You get the VIPs on board, they get excited, you give them an iPad with Zag keyboard, that's always really good as well. And they can do whatever they want to do from the VIP lounge at Heathrow or JFK. And that's actually, how you do it. But you have to understand it's a complete revamp of the entire organisation. Why would you? Your competitors doing it, would you do it? And there's various ways in which you can approach this, but it has to have that top level support, but it equally has to understand that grassroots communication that's going on inside your organisation that's not directly involved in any of these campaigns or social, but by the fact that it's people talking to people they are, and it's leaking out there. And harness that. The best evangelists you've ever got are your people.
So can I ask another question? I'm determined to up my engagement metric here. The balanced scorecard is the dominant framework amongst the Global 2000 organisations for business performance management. Could I just have a straw poll and ask who in the room, in their organisations, or through their clients, feel that connected to that balanced scorecard or an equivalent system to business performance management? Do you feel plugged into that? Hands up if you do. Bloody marvellous. Can we pick on you? Can we get a mic to the lady at the back? We'd love you to tell us how you feel that and what it means to you from a Monday to Friday perspective.
I have a very, very clear output, which is agreed by the board. I'm on the board. I set those myself. My MD, my chairman, set those for me. And I have to deliver on them, and I am measured by them. And they are all tied into business outcomes.
So you're feeling quite cocky in the room, actually.
No, I'm not.
Yeah,
It puts me under enormous pressure, but it does mean that I know that I'm delivering.
Wow, so I think this is quite a statistically significant sample. And probably representative, therefore, of the fact that the vast majority of activity that we call generally social media is still lipstick on a pig. It's not in the fabric of an organisation. You're not feeling like you're welded to it and making a difference to the business's success. And therefore, QED, this is the most important topic of 2013. This is where the most gains can be achieved. Let's move on to the second one of those keywords, because that's come up on about 3 occasions already. Attribution. Matt, you talked about that. Can you explain what you mean by it?
Yeah, it's, well, no, but I think sort of fundamentally we kind of, there's kind of an incorrect view of social media. It's not true across the board, but social is seen as a kind of function of marketing in the majority of cases anyway. But you sort of think about it, marketing is based around campaigns usually. So you have a series of marketing campaigns, and social kind of just keeps going along over the top of it. So I think that like marketing is a function of social media, really, so online anyway. And we sort of talk about, going back to sort of BPM and things, people are looking at a marketing campaign. You start a campaign, you do something, you made X amount of money. And you're not kind of considering the wider view and the continuing value of that. So, we need to be measuring things like brand lift over time, or search value, or reduced service costs and things, which I know some people are. But I think like CRM, like retention management, and that kind of ability to create lifetime value and to raise customers' lifetime value is the most important thing. Unfortunately, I guess for most businesses, you can't say, well, this customer will be worth a lot to us over 20 years, because they're like, well, we've got to pay the rent on the office at the end of the month, basically. So I think that's where the...
Thanks, Matt. I'm just going to ask Andrew to come in on attribution, because I know it's a specialist topic.
Yeah, I know. I'm a big fan of attribution.
If you could also cover ZMOT or ZMOT, or however Google describes zero moment of truth.
Okay.
That'd be super.
Well, just start with attribution. I guess it's the Holy Grail, which is trying to ascertain, what is the optimal mix of channels and interactions that deliver the things that you want. Whether that's selling stuff, whether that's changing people's view of things. It's ultimately about persuading a group of people that you've identified to change their behaviour. Traditionally, that's always been tough. I come from a public relations background, and that's always been a perennial issue. Is how do you demonstrate the value? Bill Gates said if he was down to his last dollar, his last marketing dollar, he'd spend it on PR. Except Microsoft, like any other business, rarely spends more than a small percentage of its total marketing budget on public relations, in which case, if it's so bloody brilliant, why don't people invest in it more? And that's traditionally been because of the difficulty in demonstrating what real and direct line of sight impact it's had. It's been easier for other elements of the marketing mix. However, in the world we live in, it's clearly a lot easier. And one of my favorite stats of recent times, it's on the back of some Google research in the US, which says that 90% of all media consumption today is done through a screen. 90%. We watch TV, we're on a tablet, we're on a smartphone. Print represents probably 4% of media consumption. If 65% of all social media activity begins on a smartphone, think about that. We are in a totally social and mobile-driven world, and I think a lot of people haven't actually caught up with that yet.
Can I just jump in and say that I think
Jump
I sort of want to disagree with you, just to entertain
go ahead.
a little
Please
bit.
disagree with me.
But here's the thing. You're absolutely right. For years and years and years, public relations was meant to improve your relationships with your stakeholders, whether they were employees or the community or anybody else. And it was very, very difficult to monetize that. You could monitor, lower legal costs in your community, and that was about it. But now you can actually measure the development and the health of relationships in a variety of ways. I mean, first of all, you have the stream of engagement from an initial connection somewhere, whether it's on Facebook or LinkedIn or somewhere else. You can watch that relationship with your CRM, with some other way. You can watch that relationship develop from, if you were in my session yesterday, from that point of, I think I like you, but I really don't know whether you're my weird Uncle Ralph that lives in the basement or you're really a nice company out there. And all the way through to, okay, I'm going to try your product. And then, oh my God, I guess I like it enough to say something about it, and then I'm going to try it again or buy it or recommend it or whatever. You can watch all that stuff in social media. So I think that if you forget the attribution point of I need to attribute this to a sale and say I can measure the contribution of social media to the health of my relationships, I think that's a very valid metric. And we actually, have proven now that you can't do it with computers, but you can do it human. You can actually devise a set of relationship metrics similar to the Grunig relationship instrument and apply that to social media. So I can tell you whether trust is increasing or the communal sense is improving or your exchange relationships are improving. All of those things you can, in fact, pull out of social media.
So attribution is a tricky one. Have you ever run a
No,
Facebook?
it's not.
Have you ever run or seen anyone claim to have run a Facebook promotion and then claimed the uptick in sales as their own? And the paid media chap has gone, yes, that's my bonus sorted for this year. Meanwhile, those people in poor old public relations are sat there wondering how they can demonstrate an uptick in anything this particular month. I asked the Facebook manager, did they benefit at all, per chance, on the last 20-odd years of reputation building? And of course they did, because there was instant brand recognition as soon as that Facebook campaign was launched. There was an instant understanding amongst the intended recipients of that campaign as to what that brand stands for. And the person running that Facebook campaign was building on all of that hard work that's come before. What I've seen again and again and again is that a CMO in place for 18, 24 months wants to sweat the asset. Just literally wring everything out of that brand development work from the previous decades. Drip it dry so they can demonstrate pounds, euros, dollars dropping out the other end and then get their promotion. Which leaves their replacement, their successor, having to pick up the pieces because for the last 18, 24 months they've been neglecting the stuff that actually is harder to measure but is essential to the long-term health of the organization. That's why I say attribution's difficult. And Jackie, that's before you even bring in the fact that we're not just talking about customers as a stakeholder, we're talking about employees, past, present, and future, and binding those into developing mutual value.
Mm-hmm. And I think one of the things that those companies that are, we term them making social part of their DNA. So the way we approach it from a web science point of view is social isn't something you do, it's who you are. That fundamentally there are strands to this, like there are with our DNA strands, and that the organisation has to be reorganised or recreated around those. And what we're finding is that companies will discover talent via social. People that have something to offer, particularly from Gen Y, will discover companies and add value there. And so there's a symbiotic relationship being developed from a company and outreach, and then somebody that's out there connecting with a brand or with a company. And I think we're at the beginning of all of this, but the smart companies are doing smart hires on that basis. Now, there are obviously the others who say, if you've got a clout score of whatever, we'll hire you. Those are not the people I'm talking about. And so this is, the whole thing has to be developed. But as social media specialists, the thing I wanted to get over in my talk this morning is understand you're at the forefront of adding the real value of it, because it's going to be around the social data that this is all created. We're not at that place now, and we still have a hard push to do, and that's pretty much what everybody said here. But within the next 18 months, 2 years, that won't be a hard push, and you'll look like some sort of magician to be able to do this stuff. But the groundwork still has to be done. And what we've found is trying to connect those resources across the organisation is quite hard, even if you've got a board level support. So we actually use crawling tools and natural language programming around the company with things like email systems and what have you, to actually find out. If you've got a global organisation of 300,000 people, it's quite hard to find your 52 evangelist spearhead team. So we mesh what is already known within the organisation, what social brings, and then we can actually measure that with kit, with technology. But this is all about that transformational piece. But at the end of the day, it's getting that core team together, those hybrid skills, and that's what's going to be the game changer. That's the difference.
So I'm watching the clock. I'm just going to sum up the answer that we've possibly concluded to the question so far. Then we're going to have a quick bash at ROI, see if we can just solve that in 5 minutes. And then Q&A. And Luke, I've just pushed lunch back 5 minutes. Is that okay? Brilliant. It seems to me that if your organisation is unique, which it is, with a unique position in a unique marketplace, which it has, that you've developed unique objectives for which you have rolled out unique strategies, you've identified the unique tactics to best execute those strategies, it doesn't seem to me to be too far-fetched, too much of a jump to then conclude that the metrics that are best for you will also be unique. You might be able to grab some KPIs, some well-thought-through, valid metrics, and I'm sure Katie will touch on Amex work as we conclude here, but you will select the ones that are right for you, the right balance in the right way, and then tailor them to your specific needs. So to me, the answer to which social media metrics matter most, the answer to that is what matters most to you. And your answer will be different to mine. ROI. David Meerman Scott has a great way of describing ROI. He says it's what C Titles asks for when they're scared. It's an excuse. I don't know if you've heard his ROI rant on one podcast, but basically he said at no point do they ask for the ROI on keeping the lawns mowed outside of HQ.
Or their secretaries.
But you ask the ROI question to defer something you do not understand. Actually, as a leader, you should be providing the answer on how to measure ROI, because you should be responsible for business performance management, and that cascade down. Let's see what Katie thinks.
Well, I think the first problem is the fact that most people asking that question would be hard-pressed to define the return that they actually want. I think it goes back to the 70,000 likes. That is a return? Go tell your accountants that that's a return. That's not a return. That's a made-up number. Fraser Likely is a fellow member of my IPR Measurement Commission, and he has written a wonderful paper on the alternatives to that, which I think makes a great deal of sense. And I think that every single day there are social media people out there doing cost-benefit analysis and cost efficiency analysis. And just because it doesn't fit into the return minus investment category, I mean, that does not mean that there are not financially calculable, acceptable to your accounting department and acceptable to your CFO, ways of measuring success. And it's called, let's compare two ways of doing things. The book, You Can't Buy Me Like, is full of this. Let's spend, $2 million buying an electoral vote like Romney did, or you can spend like $100,000 buying an electoral vote like Obama did. That's a cost-benefit analysis to social media. And companies are doing this every single day. Cisco basically did not Cisco, the networking company, but the food service company. They compared paying for monster ads to recruit people or doing it on Twitter. They saved $300,000. That is a financial return, but that is a cost comparison, a cost efficiency ratio, not an ROI. So that's the way I go.
Any of the panel like to come in on that one?
I just think that in cash terms, something that we need to kind of communicate up more effectively is that your cash return from social, you need to point out that that's a base minimum return. You can say, if you ran a social campaign and it made £1,000, that's the absolute minimum that you made. And you can kind of prove this in analytics. You can go in there and you can dig around in direct traffic and things if you're selling online, and you can see that direct is massively valuable because it's kind of, a lot of it is word of mouth, and it's not entirely trackable, but people trust that word of mouth, marketing. If a friend recommends a bicycle shop to me, then I'm more likely to use it than if I'm in the mood to buy a bicycle, basically. And a lot of our metrics are guides. If everything's going up, then you're probably doing something right, and that's good. And the difficult part is kind of rooting around in there and just finding ways to tighten that up. And sometimes it's very granular. It's not always very accurate. We're often told that you can track anything online, but in real life, not really, unless you have. I'm sure Jackie has opinions on this as well.
Yeah, I do. I mean, the thing that I would say to all of you is don't be scared about that question. And I, as I said on my talk, I divert that and say it's about influence, and I'm not going to talk ROI with you. But most companies at global level or even at SME level are not that sophisticated with their metrics that they're using that are not social. So some of these things that are held up, if you dig around on them, they're not evidence-based. People are not smart generally with their data. People are getting smarter with their data, but most of what has gone on in board decisions is not a single version of the truth from 6 different sources. So for example, in a bank we work with, the CEO needed a headline number. How many people work for my bank? It took 6 days. He got 4 numbers. They were all different and none of them were sustainable. So in terms of, it's got to be a number, it's got to be a dollar. Based on what? What metrics do you have that are that solid, that social has to be that solid? And I think the other argument we always have to be conscious of and we need to make on a continual basis is this is an investment from a long-term point of view. It's a little bit like Andrew was saying. We actually bed this foundation and we build this community. We build influencers, we build evangelists for what we do, but it's a long-term investment. And for my part, the PR people have this in terms of their philosophy and the way in which they track this and the way in which they approach this. So it's actually getting some of the smarter people together that go, okay, not going to be scared about the numbers, not going to be scared off by the idea that we can't make this less fluffy for now, but actually put it in the context of where it is. And so I think we'll get more sophisticated at that, we'll get less scared of it, and we'll start to show some real value, because it's like Abigail said earlier, having that seat on the board is because you're able to stand up against that sort of push back and say, well, based on where we are now, this is it, and then let's move it forward. But it's got to be a continual investment. So dipping in and out of these metrics and not looking at it from a monitoring point of view as well, not going to get us there. But it's a paradigm shift we're talking about here, and it's changing the mindsets of the almighty dollar, which has tended to rule.
It definitely helps if you have an organisation or a client who are already sophisticated at business performance management, because those that are recognise at the board already that not all metrics are financial. The balanced scorecard, for example, has 4 different perspectives of metrics, only one of which is financial. If you're working with a board who gets that, you should be able to slot into that easier than otherwise. If you're working with a board who just wants to talk about money and 7-day payback periods, then you're going to have a bit more of a challenge. Now, we've got 3.5 to 5.5 minutes, depending on whose clock you go by. Questions?
Hello.
Hello.
Just test it first. I'm Andy from Branded3. I just wanted to ask, we talked a lot about return on investment and attribution. Do you think these are pressures put on us more from that board level because of that lack of understanding? Because it feels like there's a disproportionate amount of onus put on proving this return on social media than there is in other channels. So, for instance, probably for over a century, people have done magazine ads, but there's no real direct way to say that advert attributed to that sale. Do you think it's just a lack of understanding that's pushing this? Because you'd never have to justify, for example, a magazine advert. People know you do more advertising, you can see a spike in the return on that. But it's only correlation in data, it's not an actual proven attribution. Is it enough to go in and say, right, there's a correlation between what we're doing on social media and what the business performance is?
Yeah, well, I think to answer that, I'd say that there's a combination of factors there. I think it's partly the fault of some of these so-called social media gurus that have kind of given this an idea that it's a silver bullet that's going to save the planet. So no wonder there's an enormous pressure on people to say, well, if it's so bloody brilliant, prove it's going to work for us. But again, we have to face the reality we're in. I mean, I agree, to get back to agreeing with people, yes, ROI, the investment bit is relatively straightforward to prove in advance. You know what you're going to spend on it, but what return do you want to see? That's the question I always back to people. Say, well, what's the ROI? Well, what ROI do you want? 10 to 1, 100 to 1? Because the next question is, well, what would need to happen in order to have that return come about? Would it necessitate? We'd need to get at least 1 million Facebook followers doing all these things and spending all this cash to get that return. Is that remotely likely? Has anyone ever done that before? Oh no. So does that suggest that our ROI figure's probably a bit bogus? Yeah, absolutely. But again, the reality is, you are going to get asked that question. Whether we like it or not, the guys with the money are going to ask the ROI question. I would suggest it's better to be prepared for it, build a case based around a traditional definition of ROI, and then once you've proved your case in that case, then you've got the opportunity to perhaps have a more fulsome discussion about the kind of metrics that really should count, financial or non-financial.
Time for one more question. Now's your chance. What a fantastic panel. Don't get this opportunity often without paying them fabulous day rates.
It's quite a generic open-ended.
Could you introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi, sorry, my name's Dave Marsham from HSBC. It's quite a generic open-ended question, but I just wanted to get your thoughts on what the blueprint or standard was for creating a global social media monitoring and listening function.
Well, the question is what do you want to know? I mean, again, it comes back to there's any number of global standards and platforms and stuff like that out there. And I've got a wonderful little checklist on my newsletter that you can go through that says, okay, what do I want? Because, do you need daily alerts? Do you need weekly alerts? What are all the different parameters not that you want, but all the people that are going to see any report, you've got to put them all in the room together and say, these are the metrics I want, these are the data points I want, these are the things that I need. Let's remember that measurement, not the monitoring piece of this necessarily, but the monitoring piece comes into it, which is it provides data for you to make better decisions. It is not about proving your self-worth or your worth or your job or anything else. It is providing you data to make decisions that are better, that make the company succeed more. So whatever the platform is, better be delivering the data that you need to make those decisions and work backwards from there.
Thank you.
Time has beaten us. I will just say that this is an incredibly important question, just in case you hadn't got that. It also informs the work that the Association for the Measurement and Evaluation of Communications, AMEC, is doing, and also more widely under Katie's auspices with a group that's informally called the Conclave, which includes about every single acronym you can possibly shake a stick at in terms of institutions and associations around the world. Interestingly, combining paid media chaps and chapesses with unpaid media chaps and chapesses. And they've never really had to speak each other's language before, so that's an entertaining 3-hour standard setting call, I can tell you.
Thank you. This is the man responsible for the influence questions,
So we will be presenting papers in Madrid in June to constitute social media measurement standards. As Katie just said, I am running the one to do with standard setting for aspects of influence. And I'd like to know what you think as people who are doing it day to day. So I've just posted a stack on my blog at philipsheldrake.com and just tweeted about it as well, which runs you through where we've got to in understanding influence in terms of social media metrics. But we can only forge a great standard come June if you guys read that and tell us what you think. So please do that. And hopefully we might see you in Madrid as well. So thanks very much to my panel here. Time for lunch.
Thank you.